Well, good morning. As we announced last night, we have reached an agreement that will allow us to move forward today with organizing the Minnesota House of Representatives. The full agreement will be posted soon, but in short, Democrats secured the power sharing agreement we were seeking. Most importantly, Brad Tabke will be seated. Election contest will go to the Ethics Committee, and 68 votes will be required to create a vacancy. Brad Tabke won on election night, he won in a recount, and he won in court. This agreement upholds the will of the voters as expressed in a free and fair election. While they have a one-seat advantage, Republicans will chair the committees. When we are tied, we will have co-chairs and equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans on all the committees, with the exception being the Oversight Committee, which will have a GOP chair and a GOP majority. Leader Dameth will be Speaker for 2 years, but with some limitations that align with our closely divided House and soon to be tied. House DFLers will be in the chamber today to provide a quorum, and committees will begin their work on Monday. This agreement honors and protects the will of the voters both in Shakopee and statewide. That is what Democrats have been asking for from the beginning, and I'm pleased that this agreement does that. Given the situation we faced, with Republicans looking to engage in an illegitimate power grab, Democrats made the difficult decision to deny quorum to protect the will of the voters, and we succeeded. That it took nearly 4 weeks to reach this agreement is regrettable and was unnecessary. This agreement is essentially the same as the last offer I put on the table on Monday, January 13th, including conceding the speakership. We could have avoided all of this, honored the will of the voters, and started in a bipartisan, collaborative fashion from day one. With that said, though, I would like to express my gratitude for all of the members of the final negotiating team on both sides of the aisle. It was really great to be in a room together with Representative Torkelson, Representative Scott, Representative Niska, Representative Robbins, Leader Dameth, Representative Stevenson, Representative Hollins, Representative Long, Representative Gomez. And I think it was all of us being in the room together. There were some moments of levity. There were some legislative jokes. There were some conflict-oriented jokes. And that got us to the place where we could get this bipartisan agreement. Prior to this conflict, I publicly stated that this tie gives us a golden opportunity to show that bipartisan governing can work. And even though we had these rough few weeks, we can turn the page now. And we have an opportunity to really show Minnesotans that we can govern together in a collaborative way. The 2024 election made clear that Minnesota is a very closely divided state, and I think that we can make this arrangement work for them. We are set up for success in this agreement. Democrats will continue working alongside Minnesotans to build a future where everyone can get ahead, not just the rich and powerful. We will continue to stand up for Minnesotans' rights and freedoms, and we will do all we can to protect them from the chaos, cruelty, and incompetence coming from the Trump administration. We're looking forward to getting the session properly, lawfully underway today. And with that, I turn it over to DFL Floor Leader Jamie Long.
Good morning, everyone. If Democrats had attended the first day of session without an agreement, the GOP, we know, would have kicked out Representative Tabke and would have attempted to take full control of the chamber for 2 years, even though the voters sent a tie. This agreement honors the voters of Shakopee and honors the voters of Minnesota who sent a tie to the Minnesota House. The co-governing agreement ensures that Representative Tabke is seated, and just as importantly, it prevents any party from unilaterally trying to remove a member in a future election contest by setting the vote threshold at 68 for an election contest. The agreement protects power sharing for all committees, including requiring bipartisan votes for all bills that are coming out of committee. The agreement ensures a bipartisan negotiation on House rules so that even in a one-vote advantage, the GOP can't set themselves up for permanent control. The agreement limits the ability of the Speaker to veto any agreed-upon legislative calendar. The agreement stops the effort of the GOP to acquire unilateral, unprecedented subpoena power to the Oversight Committee. The agreement protects conference committees by ensuring equal bipartisan membership. These add up to important constraints on the role of the speakership. The GOP also importantly still won't be able to pass a bill without us. Rather than an attempt at one-party control, which would have led to a perpetual power struggle, we are optimistic that this framework sets up opportunities for our members to work together on a bipartisan basis on issues that we all care about, like affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable childcare, and more. And with that, we'll take questions.
What was the thing that helped break the logjam? I mean, was it the Supreme Court ruling that was coming today? I mean, can you give us a sense of what moved things?
I think, as of January 14th, the Republicans were not ready to concede that they should seat Brad Tabke. The court decision came out that morning. And I think that even though there were members of that caucus who were very clear to their leadership and their colleagues that having seen the evidence presented at trial, they would not be voting to oust Brad Tabke, I think there was some hope within their caucus that they could convince their entire caucus to unify and take that partisan action of getting rid of Brad Tabke, because that would give them a chance at 68. So I don't think they were ready to honor the will of the voters in Shakopee on the first day of the session, or until we got the Supreme Court ruling on quorum. The other thing they were not ready to do until the Supreme Court ruling on quorum was to share power. They wanted 2-year speakership and 2-year chairs. We were really arguing over, in the beginning, 27 gavels, the speakership and 26 committees. In the end, we have an agreement where there are 28 gavels involved. 26 of them will be shared, and 2 of them will be in Republican hands.
What did you have to give up?
The speakership, but that was very clear from the moment that we were 67, 66, that had to be the play to get the deal done.
So what will your title be officially, how? And will you be at the majority minority leader, Mike, and what do we call you?
Well, the funny thing is, in 2007, Margaret Anderson Kelleher had a new rule drafted to honor then former Speaker Steve Swigum. So the House rules will refer to me as Speaker Emeritus. So that, I know, it's really, it really makes me sound old. The other title that would work would be DFL Caucus Leader. But no, I will not be on the floor. It'll be that guy.
Okay.
Could you explain for us the giving up the speakership? I know you mentioned having given an offer on January 13th. But at what point did you give up to the point where you're now allowing the Republicans to have the speakership fully for 2 years, no more co-speaker?
Well, it's not fully. There's some constraints on it. It was very similar to what I put on the table on the 13th, which is speakership with constraints. And that's the final deal.
On the 13th, that you offered, though, that Speaker Damith would be speaker for 2 years and you wouldn't have any co-speakership.
Yeah, they leaked it to the Reformer, which was interesting because I thought it maybe looked really reasonable. But yeah, they leaked that offer. We never made that publicly. Our caucus wasn't there. I was there. Our caucus wasn't there. I knew I could get our caucus there if it got us into the chamber on the first day of session, but the Republicans weren't ready to take it. Peter and then somebody else.
No, I want to make sure everybody.
Okay.
Could you explain some of those limitations that you explained to the speakership?
Sure. I brought it with because it's not posted yet. At 67, 67, there'll be an even number of conferees on the conference committees. Each caucus will select its own conferees. We will make equal appointments to the boards and commissions. Each caucus will make its own appointments. We'll negotiate the odd numbers, and if we don't agree, there won't be an appointment made. The speaker must take up all the bills on the calendar for the day set by the Rules Committee, which will be tied and co-chaired under the tie. Signed conference committee reports will be taken up. We'll have shared decision-making on all House administrative and nonpartisan functions. And for the purposes of both floor and committee, each caucus leader may excuse their own members and approve remote participation.
Do any of those protect against, say, calling the question? We saw that at the end of last year yourself, with that tactic. Is there any protection against that?
You need 68 votes to call the question, and they don't have 68 votes.
But the speaker does get to make procedural rulings, right?
Correct.
That amendment is out of order.
Correct.
You would not have the votes to override the speaker's ruling if you were 67, 67. Is there any provision to give you a little bit more oomph on those sorts of procedural rulings by the presiding officer?
No, it's an attendance compulsion measure, right? Each side is definitely going to want to have all of their members there. So to the extent, some folks have gotten used to going on vacations or things, during the session. We have a few Republicans who will have to be here all session long who haven't been keeping that custom.
If she rules all of your amendments out of order, and you move to override the ruling of the speaker, that fails on a 67-67 vote. That's not a small power that the presiding officer will have. Do you have any way to require agreement on those sorts of decisions?
Well, we have the messy power of the filibuster. And Republicans deployed that, you saw, rather effectively whenever they were unhappy with my decisions on, either on which bills to take up, which order. And so, we of course have the capacity to be annoying, but that is a sort of a mutual torture thing. So I'm hoping that we can avoid that for the most part. Generally speaking, we have been able to come to agreements on amendments. So when I was presiding, we would say like, what are your top 5? You've got some in here that are out of order, but if you want to get a vote on them and you want to pull back like 25 of your other amendments, we can not raise the point of order on germaneness or budget resolution.
And if I could add too.
Yeah, please do.
No bill is going to get to the floor once we're back in a tie, unless there's bipartisan support, because there's a co-chaired rules committee. So there will have to be bipartisanship for any bill to come to the floor, and no bill will get off the floor without 68 votes. So whatever amendments they want to put on, they're going to need Democrats to be able to pass it. So they don't really have the same tools that a majority would, because they don't have a majority.
But in this time where they do have the, temporary advantage on committees, couldn't, with Speaker Dameth, they suspend the rules to bring bills out of committee onto the floor and force you guys to take tough votes for campaign purposes?
No, to suspend the rules, you need 90 votes. But they will be able to move bills through committee, and they will be able to get bills to the floor. They just won't be able to send any bills out of the House chamber without our help.
What about the fraud committee? What was the decision behind giving a majority to Republicans on that?
Well, we knew they needed some concessions to go back to their caucus with. I mean, they started this session 67-66, and so there had to be some things they could go back to their caucus and say, look, these are the things that we got. This makes it worth it for us to cut this deal. And that was one of the things that made sense to work on with them. All of us together want to make sure that we have effective oversight of all of the spending and policy that we put in place. With a part-time citizen legislature, we don't have a lot of time for oversight typically. So we're eager to work on that. We passed a very comprehensive package in 2023 of oversight measures, and we're looking forward to working with the Republicans to see how all those pieces have been implemented by the Walz administration. I think Matt had a question from a Greater Minnesota reporter.
Yeah, we got a question from WDAY Radio. The question is, did this agreement happen because, as the Republican Party of Minnesota said in a release, because of 7,000 Minnesotans signing a recall petition?
No. The Republicans have filed frivolous recall petitions before, which we've had dismissed. I remember 3 to 6 in 2019, and these will be dismissed as well. The reason why I think we finally have a deal is the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled on quorum on January 24th and invalidated everything that Republicans had done from January 14th to January 24th. And at that point is when the negotiations really began in earnest.
Were there
On that
concerns
point-
about the ruling that could resulted from the hearing that was scheduled for today, though? I mean, did that?
You'd have to ask them. Obviously, I think that Steve Simon's case was a lot stronger than the Republicans' case. We filed, it's okay. We filed an amicus brief. So I think, on the briefing, I liked our side of the case much better, but you'd have to ask them if that was an influence. The KSTP poll showing that 55% of Minnesotans wanted us to enter into a power sharing agreement did come out about 45 minutes before we inked the deal. So I'm not sure if that was a factor.
Is there anything in this deal that obligates the Republicans to drop the recall drives? Or at least obligates us Republicans to try to prevail upon the state party organization?
No, they claimed distance from those recall petitions, so.
What, bills can Minnesotans expect in the first couple weeks here? They need bipartisan support, so is there a discussion about what policies can be passed in the next couple weeks?
We haven't had a lot of substantive discussions on policy. The thing that we have discussed is our shared interest in passing a balanced budget within the regular session. Nobody wants a special session. Nobody wants a government shutdown. They're very suspicious of us. We're very suspicious of them. And the idea that folks would be unreasonable in budget discussions, but we do seem to share the principle that we need to get a budget done. And so I think all of our energy will be focused on that. And one of the fun moments of the negotiation was Ways and Means Chair Paul Torkelson and soon-to-be Ways and Means Co-Chair Zach Stevenson's no shenanigans handshake deal.
Yeah, Representative Torkelson and I have had good preliminary conversations about working together. I'm confident that we'll be able to work together. And we committed to work together on the budget to get the budget approved on a timely basis out of Ways and Means in a no shenanigans handshake.
You literally said that in your.
Yeah, literally called it a no shenanigans handshake.
Well, that was Paul Torkelson's words, so. Paul Torkelson has a lot of chainsaws. We also learned that.
Speaker Emeritus, when we were at Veterans for that presser, you talked about how lawyers prefer to settle because they can control the terms.
That's right.
Wasn't that a factor though, in this case, that's maybe still gonna be discussed upstairs for both of you? That this was a way if you lost that case upstairs, they could start doing things like trying to compel and fine and things like that. That was a risk. And they had a risk of then losing a second time and having nothing again. Don't you think that had something to do with breaking this thing?
No, we were very clear on the fact that the Minnesota House of Representatives cannot compel the attendance of absent members until it's organized. There's no sergeant, there's no comptroller, there is nothing to direct. So until the House is organized, that provision of the Constitution doesn't come into play. We thoroughly researched that before we decided to deny quorum. We knew what the risks were, and we felt that the risks were worth undertaking. So we did not have concern about how that lawsuit would come out. The Republicans perhaps did, but I think it was just time. I think probably more than anything, we had reached the moment where it was time.
On the money issue, the Republicans probably have hammered your party every single day on the amount of money that was made while you were denying quorum. How do you think that message might resonate with voters in a couple of years?
Well, I think that Republicans unconstitutionally and illegitimately seizing power and playing house for 2 weeks is also something that should concern voters. The Republicans knew that what they were doing was wrong, and they chose to do it anyway, should they get paid for violating the Constitution for those 2 weeks. So I think playing those kind of petty games don't further, our work together this session. Members were working. On their side, they were working to try to have committee hearings. On our side, we were working in our districts. So I think it's time to turn the page on that and move on. I also think that voters don't want politicians who are just going to put their finger in the wind and do what's ever popular in any given moment. They want people who will stand up for their principles. And I think in this country right now, it is especially important that we stand up to protect our democratic institutions and the rule of law.
It appears you got less this time than the last time in the House where Democrats got the gavels. Secretary of State Joan Groh, who presided every day for a long time back then, said Democrats had the upper hand because they had solo committee chairs, Republicans got the speaker. Was it the residency issue that put you at a little bit of a disadvantage on getting the same power sharing last time?
I think this is actually a much more balanced agreement than in '79 because the constraints on the speakership combined with the shared gavels in all of the committees set us up for collaboration. What they did in '79 is Democrats controlled some committees, Republicans controlled other committees, so they didn't start collaborating until they got to the floor. The way we have it set up, nothing will be able to get to the floor unless there's bipartisan collaboration first. So what I wanted to do is decentralize responsibility and decentralize conflict so that the chairs of the respective committees have to work things out, not leadership at the end of the day, not on the floor.
Thoughts about Curtis Johnson putting you guys in this position in the first place?
No, I think it was the Republicans' unwillingness to honor the will of the voters. Because imagine for a moment we had come in on the first day 67-67. We could have tied out at presiding officer for this many weeks to get them to agree to honor the will of the voters in Shakopee and to honor the power sharing agreement. So I think that that's a little bit of a red herring because the biggest issue here was honoring the will of the voters in Shakopee. And I think, in fact, there would have been a lot more pressure on those few principled Republicans who were not willing to vote to overturn the results of the election, understood that the voters had spoken. There would have been a lot more partisan pressure on them because that would have been the only way to get an advantage, would be to do a partisan ouster of a duly elected member. And that could have been very ugly as well.
Feel about,
Should we read anything into the fact that this is not a joint press conference with yourself and Republican leaders?
Well, I think we're going to have to work to get to the point where we're collaborating together in a bipartisan way. Leader Dameth and I had a very positive relationship from November 5th through December 20th. Things got rocky on December 23rd. Obviously, a lot has happened since December 23rd. I think we'll be able to work together well, but it will take some time. We're certainly, everybody's still pretty angry at each other.
So how should we expect things to unfold on the House floor then this afternoon?
Boring. You should expect it to be boring. I would expect that Secretary Simon will call the House to order. There'll be a prayer, there'll be a pledge. The clerk pro tem will take the roll. A quorum will be present, and we will proceed to the election of the presiding officer. I would expect there'd be 67 votes for Lisa Dameth, and that there would be 66 votes for Melissa Hortman. And then after Leader Dameth is sworn in as Speaker of the House, the next order of business will be implementation of the power sharing agreement.
Even with the no negotiations, or sorry, no shenanigans handshake, do you see any situation where this deal could fall through?
Representative Dameth gave her word that this deal would be implemented, and I take her at her word.
Do you think a side won, or did each party get something from this? Do you think it's equal, or someone won?
No, I think the way that you get a compromise is give and take. You have to have give and take. I think what we got was what we were seeking from the beginning, was honoring the will of the voters in Shakopee and statewide. What we wanted was a power sharing agreement. We got a power sharing agreement. We wanted Brad Tabke to be seated. We got that. The Republicans wanted the speakership for 2 years, and they wanted a committee on oversight, and they got that.
how do you feel about the timeline, especially with respect to deadlines?
We have plenty of time. The budget forecast will be late this year because the forecaster that gives us our economic data is running behind. So we won't even get the economic forecast until March 6th, which puts the governor's budget arriving on our desk somewhere around March 19th. And we'll be at 67-67 on March 17th.
You talked about how it took a little bit for your caucus to get on board with the idea of giving up the speakership for 2 years, but you were there much earlier. Can you just talk about maybe what they had pause about and how you got them to come around?
Well, I'll say from my perspective, I have 26 individuals I had appointed co-chairs. I had 26 additional individuals I had appointed co-vice chairs, and they had spent 60 days doing work. So if I could trade one gavel for 52 opportunities for bipartisan collaboration, for me, that was a no-brainer. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to where the caucus was.
Yeah, I'll say that Speaker Emeritus Hortman was more selfless than the caucus was. The caucus is very protective of our leader, and we are loyal to our leader, and she has led us through some incredibly challenging and productive 2 years, including the session that we had the last two. But it was a real sacrifice, personally, I think, for Speaker Emeritus Hortman to take this step. And I think the caucus recognizes that and is grateful to her for her being willing to do that.
As lawyers, is there any relief in not going to the courts? Because the courts have already been asked to decide, and they decided once for a Democrat, once for a Republican. If they had to decide on this, that balance would be off. You know, just the nonpartisanship in the courts. Is that good for separation of powers?
I think the people who are most relieved if that case doesn't go forward are the Minnesota Supreme Court justices, because their order on January 24th essentially said, leave and don't come back.
Did you give Representative Dameth any advice on being speaker?
I have not.
Do you
you think in hindsight, you would have denied quorum until March if that was necessary?
Yes. We made the decision knowing the risks.
What about your freshmen? Did they get a miss out on the first month, and does that harm, relationships in their experience?
They have a unique set of experiences. They will be forever in the history books as the first denial of quorum in Minnesota history. And I think, are very, very bonded as a team as a result of this difficult time. We did not take it lightly. This is not the path we chose. This is the path that the Republicans forced us into because there was no other way for us to protect the will of the voters. And we were not going to be complicit in having the Republicans throw out a duly elected member of the legislature.
Time for one more question.
What happens with doing something to prevent a tie?
I understand nonpartisan staff have some ideas. I'm really curious how that will work. The legislature drew the districts differently in 1970. The court struck it down. The legislature drew 135, so we couldn't have a tie. And the court said, you can't do that. We have a one-person, one-vote standard in the Minnesota Constitution. So we will definitely be working on that this year at some point. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.